Walters is open late and a great spot to watch the final rounds of the NBA and Stanley Cup playoffs. Walters Sports Bar and Restaurant is located just across the street from Nationals Park.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Here's Abrams, the pitch. Swing a line drive, base hit right field toward the corner. Wood's going to score from second. Chaparro lumbering for third. He's going to be waved in. Abrams rounding second, heading for third. The throw-in is off the first baseman, Olsen. It's a two-run triple for C.J. Abrams. Nationals lead 4-2. That one down in the right field corner. And C.J. Abrams, who homered to tie the game in the 8th, has a two-run triple here in the 10th to put the Nationals up by a deuce. What a big hit and a big game for C.J. Abrams. He now has 45 RBIs this season. His second triple of the year against the lefty Dylan Lee. But again, a slow runner at second. No sign of the bunt, and a swing and a ground ball to the open left side. It's going to be knocked off the glove of Abrams. Trump is going to come around from third. He's going to dive into home plate without a play, and the game is tied. He scores from second on an infield single with the Nationals trying to guard against the bunt. It's 4-4. How do you like that?
2 balls, 2 strikes. The set and the pitch. Swinging a line drive, base hit center field. Cruz has it on a hop. Runner trying to score. Throw to the plate is not in time. And Chadwick Trump, 2 for 2, wins the game for the Braves with his second single to center. It scores Eli White. And the Braves are out to mob Chadwick Trump of all people. And Atlanta walks it off with a 5-4 win in 11 innings.
And welcome to Nats Chat. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast. I'm joined by Washington Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman of NatsJournal.com. He is at Truist Park in Atlanta, where the Nats had quite the game on Friday night in facing the best team in the National League in MLB's 2026 regular season so far. A 5-4 11-inning loss at the Atlanta Braves in Game 1 of a 3-game series. This was a game in which the Nats blew a 1-0 7th-inning lead, overcame a 2-1 8th-inning deficit, and blew a 4-2 10th inning lead. The Nats now are 25-27. The Braves now are a National League best 36-16. But regarding the Nats, they now also are 4-5 in extra inning games. 9 of the Nats' 52 games have been extra inning games. There is so much to get to with this game. More excellence from shortstop C.J. Abrams. Another, wait for it, good outing from pitcher Miles Mikolas. Has he been fixed? Has the glitch been fixed? As was said in the great movie Office Space. We'll discuss. And also a rather mixed game for Nats relief pitchers. But Mark, the Braves are such a good team. And, you know, it's not just the 36-16 record. Their run differential is a preposterous plus 105, best in the majors. This game was a battle, and it was wild watching this game. The game was happening in the rain, and in a lot of ways, it's a minor miracle that we had no rain delay in this game.
Yeah, I mean, the forecast was bad all along. There was no BP because it was raining all afternoon. It cleared up in time for them to start on time, and then you kind of knew they better move this one along to make sure it gets in. It looked like we were going to be good, and then you got to extra innings, and the rain started to fall, and I don't know if it impacted anything at the end, but I feel like I've covered enough games here over the years now to know night games at this ballpark in Atlanta, there's a good chance there's going to be rain, and there's a good chance it's going to be a late night. There have been so many of these back and forth games that are decided late between these two teams. And it's, I don't know about you, but for me, it's like hard for me to process this one and decide how did I feel about it. I think there's stuff to feel good about. I think there's stuff to feel annoyed about. There's stuff to be upset about. I guess it's a good sign of where they are, that putting a lot of stock in these games, and that you don't just shrug it off as, oh, well, tough loss to a good team. Like, there's plenty of reason to be annoyed by it and say they should have won the game. But I think you can also take a step back and say there were a lot of positives to it. And the hope would be that this young team with all these experiences they're getting in these kind of games, eventually it's going to pay off for them and they're going to start winning these kind of games.
I mean, if the Nats were a win-now team, I think there'd be a good bit of anger with this loss. But because the expectations for this season were so low, because the Nats are in a restarted rebuild, and because the Nats are having, all things considered, a surprisingly solid season, I do think there's a lot to like about what happened in this game. This game was nearly a great win for the Nats. I mean, that's kind of how I'm looking at this. But of course, the game did not end up being a win. But I mentioned C.J. Abrams. This is becoming something really special what this guy is doing. And it's not just like the raw numbers. It's when he's doing what he is doing. And we've had some fun with the RBI total. But like you talk about clutch, has any Nats player been more clutch than Abrams so far this season? 2 huge hits in this game. The Nats in this game were mixed offensively, so over 11 innings, just 4 runs, in large part due to going just 1 for 13 with runners in scoring position. So you talk about the frustration aspect with this game, 1 for 13 with runners in scoring position. But the Nats did total 10 hits, which were 2 home runs, a triple, and 7 singles. The Nats worked 2 walks, did struggle against the Brave starting pitcher Bryce Elder. He allowed 1 run in 6 innings. But one of the homers and the triple came from Abrams. He was the Nats starting shortstop and number 4 batter, 2 for 5 with a solo homer and a 2-run triple. Abrams in the Nats 1-run 8th, a 1-out solo homer to right center to tie the game at 2. Abrams in the Nats 2-run 10th, a 1-out first pitch, 2-run triple to right field for a 4-2 Nats lead. The 2 biggest hits in this game from a Nats perspective coming from C.J. Abrams, and he continues to thrive. His OPS now at 947. He's slugging .556 with a .391 on base. And I was looking at his totals from previous seasons, and if you just go by OPS 2022 moving forward, 604, 712, 747, 748. So, like, for all of the talent that he had possessed, he had been a guy who had been putting up OPSs in the 700s. Not bad, but that's not special. What he's doing right now is special. A 947 OPS is special. And like I said, when he is doing what he is doing is special. This is one of the great storylines of this Nats season, this emergence of C.J. Abrams.
Yeah, and I think if you look back at his first half numbers, you'd see at least the OPS starting with an 8, if not with a 9 for some of that. So that's the only caveat I give to it, is that we have seen similar things from him in the first half. Now, as I discussed the other day, there's been a consistency this year that was not necessarily there in the past, where he'd get red hot for a month or for several weeks and then go ice cold after that for a while. This has really been almost start to finish, sustaining it at this level. But I think the big thing, as you point out, is when he's doing this and the significance of these moments for him. James Wood is probably the more productive hitter, although maybe he's not, but you tend to think of it as that. I don't feel like most of James Wood's home runs or just big production comes in these critical late game situations, not nearly as much as Abrams. And CJ has done this for several years now. I think back to games that he's done this in New York against the Mets with some really big clutch hits late. He's done it, I think, on the West Coast a few times. Like that image of him launching a ball into the stands, standing there admiring it, looking back at the dugout, flipping the bat because he just gave them the lead in the 8th inning or later. Like that's happened a good number of times now in his career, and it's certainly happening a lot this season for him. So I think that's what stands out the most, is that he's saving his best for the biggest moments in these games, and that's a trait to have. Whether you believe in the idea of clutch or not, it's a great thing if you have somebody that can consistently come through for you in those kind of situations.
Well, clutch certainly is something you can look at retroactively. Like, you certainly can assess who came through in big spots, who contributed to winning. I mean, beyond RBI, we do have stats like win probability added. So you can quantify clutch, and Abrams has been clutch. And, we've had this back and forth between Abrams and James Wood in terms of who's having the best season overall. Abrams now has a 40-point lead on Wood in the OPS department. So there is a bit of a gap at this point now. Abrams at 947, Wood at 907. But just cannot say enough good things about the offense of C.J. Abrams, and he came up huge in this game. Also homering for the Nats on Friday night, Curtis Mead. He is the Nats starting third baseman and number 3 batter, 2 for 5 with a solo homer and a single. Mead in the Nats 1-run 6, a leadoff full count home run to left center to put the Nats up 1-0. You know, as we're talking OPS here, Curtis Mead now an 800 OPS guy, 803 on the season, 354 on base, 449 slugging percentage, being deployed in very effective ways by the Nats with the new process. And given the situation now at third base, it would seem that we're going to be seeing a lot of Curtis Mead as the Nats starting third baseman.
Yeah, we are. And I think one of the key reasons for that is he's not just producing against left-handers. He's actually got better numbers against righties. Now, 866 OPS against righties, 767 against lefties. He started out here as like the right-handed platoon at first base with Luis Garcia. But you heard Blake Butera a few days ago mention how impressed he's been with Mead's progress against righties and how that is proving that he can be more than just the back half of a platoon. And given where they're at right now at third base with Brady House in the minors, and let's be clear, Jorbit Bibas is not doing much of anything for them from an offensive standpoint. There's certainly a case to be made that Curtis Mead should be, if not the everyday third baseman, at least playing the bulk of the time there. I think he's earned that at this point, and that's a big step for him. I don't think anybody was really viewing him in those kind of terms when he first got here. You thought, oh, he could be a nice piece off the bench. Then it was, well, he could be part of a platoon maybe at first base. No, now he may, at least for the time being, may become essentially their starting third baseman.
Yeah, now the defense at third, I think, will be the question with Curtis Mead. The offense, he has been providing for, the majority of this season. The defense has been a little spotty, and I go to the bottom of the first in this game. The Nats using an opener and reliever, Richard Lovelady, and Lovelady a scoreless bottom of the first, but he gave up a one-out first pitch double by Mauricio Dubon into left field. And the double came on a sharp grounder that went right by Mead. And if you watch the replay, the ball was right there for Mead to make the play, and he didn't make the play. So stuff like that is going to stand out. But offensively speaking, Curtis Mead doing such a good job. James Wood in this game was the Nats starting designated hitter and number 1 batter, 1 for 4, single, and a walk.
Hey, Nats fans. After the exciting Nats game, have a listen to some relaxing solo piano music to unwind and help you go to sleep. I'm Tim Newmark, the composer of the Nats Chat theme song, and you can find my latest music on Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, and anywhere you stream music. The song you're hearing now is called Improv in A-flat major, The End of the Road.
Big thanks to our sponsor, BetterHelp, for partnering with us for this important conversation about mental health.
This is Steve Smith here, former NFL wide receiver and host of the 89 show on YouTube. So having a counselor and working with BetterHelp, that gives you an opportunity to really start to unpack. But people don't understand, when you unpack things, you also open up a box that you're not always sure what's inside. So I think that's why seeing a professional is extremely important. If you need someone to open up to, visit BetterHelp. That's betterhelp.com/89 to get started.
Wind up to 3-2. Swing a fly ball deep left center field for Mead. Back on this one, Dubon to the track, to the wall. He climbs the wall. He can't get it. It's gone. Curtis Mead is homer to the Nationals, lead 1-0 here in the 6th. Right over the 385 mark in left center field. Number 5 on the season for Curtis Mead.
I did want to hit on Dylan Cruz. He is the Nats starting right fielder and number 5 batter, 1 for 5 with a single and a stolen base. He had an outfield assist, but what actually stood out as much as anything, he had 2 hard hit groundouts. He, per StatCast, had the highest exit velocity of the game via a 106.4 mile per hour ground out for the first out in the top of the second. He, in the top of the 8th, had a 1-out ground out that, per StatCast, had an exit velocity of 98.8 miles per hour. We, so far in this latest stint from Dylan Cruz at the major league level, are seeing a lot of what we have seen previously. He has singles. He's hitting some balls hard, but he's not elevating balls. And that was like a big thing that was worked on with him in the minors. You're hitting balls hard, but elevation, like hitting balls in the air. And it just stood out watching this game. 2 really well-struck balls, but each ball resulting in a ground out for Dylan Cruz.
Right. And I think over the last 3 weeks or so at AAA, the sense was that those were now turning into line drives and even home runs in some cases. And so you hope that happens here. But so far, and it's, it's 3 games since he's been back up here. So it's way too little to draw any real conclusions, but it does look similar to what we saw from him last year. And I don't say that in a positive way. It doesn't mean there's not potential there and things that could be signs of improvement coming. But you see him down in the count a lot. I felt like multiple times this game he's down 0-2. That happened to him all the time last year. He got some pitches to hit over the plate and, as you said, hit him hard, but hit him on the ground. So that's not great. You said he did have the outfield assist from right field. That was the double play. But he wound up in center field to end this game after a pinch hitting appearance by Jose Tena for Jacob Young, which we can get into. I wasn't a huge fan of that decision, but it put Cruz in center field. And he had a chance on the final play of the game to extend the game and send it to the 12th inning. It's 2 outs. It's a man on second. The winning run is on second. It's a kind of soft line drive single to center field. He's charging in on it. And I'm watching from high above, from the press box. He's got the ball as the runner's rounding third. And that's, you say in your mind, good throw is going to get him. And you're like, you lift up out of your chair like, oh, here we go.
Runner trying to score, throw to the plate is not in time.
And the throw did not have much on it. And it bounced, I think, even before it reached the mound and just kind of skipped towards the plate. I'm not saying that that's a play that you have to make or that you can count on a guy making. But boy, I would have loved to see a better throw than that, at least to make it close, if not potentially throw him out. Now, maybe it's a wet ball. It was raining there at the end of the game. We didn't talk to Cruz afterwards, so I don't know for sure about that. But just these 3 games in, what I would just say is we're still kind of waiting for that sign of something. Like, where's the progress? And I don't want to read too much into 3 games. I want to emphasize that. And a week from now, it may be a totally different conversation. But what we have to work with so far in these 3 games, it has looked a lot like what we saw last year. And he's had some opportunities. There was an opportunity at the plate in the 10th after the Abrams triple where he can extend the lead. Abrams is on third with 1 out and he pops up to second base. I just keep waiting for that moment. Like, when is he going to come through in a big spot? He had opportunities in this game and he did not come through.
Yeah, Tim and I on the last installment of the podcast talked about that, how at least so far, it does look like it has looked previously with Dylan Cruz. I thought, and you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, that poor throw by Cruz at the end of the game was weather related. It felt like, just watching the game, that the playing conditions were becoming increasingly non-playable as things were happening. And so I felt like he deserved a pass on that. But you tell me, like, how bad were the playing conditions as the game went on?
Yeah, it was starting to cure. It wasn't raining all that hard, but it was going on for probably a good inning or 2 at that point. You saw also earlier when James Wood was on second, it was prior to the Abrams triple. Earlier in that inning, he's on second base and there's a deep drive to left and he goes back to tag up because there's plenty of room for him now to make it to third base, even on a fly ball to left field. And he stumbled and he slipped coming off the bag and had to give up and go back. And that felt like that was the rain or the slippery conditions causing that. So it's entirely possible.
Now the set, Lee delivers. Swinging a line drive deep left field. Way back in this one goes White to the warning track. He's there. He makes the catch. Wood slips at second base. He was knocked back to tag, and he holds at second. That is a base running mistake. Wood was playing it halfway.
When you have a walk-off situation like that, I get to watch the play live with my own eyes, and then I immediately have to update my story to finish it and get it done. So I never got to look at a replay of it or to really parse what happened on that. I would not be surprised. That's why I don't want to make too big a deal out of it. But just watching it live, your instincts watching baseball for many years says to you, oh, this should be a close play at the plate. And it wasn't.
Kevin Franzen, by the way, ripped James Wood for not tagging up on that play. He was too far down the line. Yes, did stumble, but that's not why Wood did not tag up. And Franzen, it was good TV. Franzen was pretty open about James Wood not doing as he should have done in that spot. So with James Wood, the Nats in this game did lose the DH, a very interesting pinch hitting decision. You just referenced it. Manager Blake Butera had Jose Tena pinch hit for Jacob Young with 2 outs and a runner on first in the 8th inning. And the Nats lost the DH for the rest of the game. That Butera did that took some chops from the rookie manager to do that.
It did, and it didn't pay off for them because Tena ends up grounding out, and that was the end of that inning, and they burned him up, and now the pitcher was batting in that spot, and that's how you end up with Jorbit Bibas batting in the 11th inning when they need to try to score the go-ahead run, and he struck out. And we talked about how much he has struggled for them. Yeah, I didn't love it just because it's 2 outs and a man on first in the 8th inning. Is Tena that much better of a hitter than Young would be there? Butera's answer was that they expected to steal second, which they did. Dalen Lau stole second, and he did like the matchup a lot better, Tena against the reliever, than Young.
Yeah, it just felt pretty strongly we were going to be able to steal second and get a runner in scoring position there, and the matchup with Tena we really liked in that spot.
We know Jacob Young has swung good bat lately. I don't know. That just to me felt like a little bit too much because of the domino effect. You can say Tena gives you a better shot at driving in that run than Young. I'll buy that argument. But then what's going to happen after that? Because they only have 4 outfielders on the roster, and because they are now going to do this a lot of times where one of those 4 is the DH, if you want to pinch hit or do anything with one of those 3 starting outfielders, you're going to have to lose your DH along the way. And so I didn't love that. It also diminished them defensively in what was obviously a very tight, close game down to the wire. I'm not saying that was like the whole game right there, but I didn't love it in the moment, and I think it did have a little bit of a domino effect the rest of the way. And I think it speaks to a larger picture, and we'll get to that with what happened on the pitching side of this. We've seen this now 52 games in. Blake Butera goes all in to try to get matchups and try to win these games, even in some of the earlier innings. And on a few occasions, we've seen it's kind of come back to haunt him at the end of the night, especially when it goes to extra innings, that the guys he's using up early are leaving him with fewer options or fewer good options at the very end of games. And I'll be curious as he moves along. Is this going to be his style all the time, or does he start to figure out, maybe that's not worth going all in the 5th inning because of what might happen in the 9th, 10th, or 11th?
Well, I think it's a really interesting thing because in so many games, the game is, say, in the 5th inning or the 6th inning, right? Like there's a big spot that if it goes your way, ends up winning you the game. And I do respect the fact that Butera, he goes all in on these decisions and he's not thinking about, but what about 2 innings from now? He's like, this is a moment. I want to make this a winning time moment. I'm going to do what it takes to make this a winning time moment. I also wonder this too. How much of this is Butera? How much of this is coming from baseball ops? How much of this is coming from the front office? How much of this is, Butera having conversations with Paul Taboni and or Ani Kalambi and or, anybody else in that front office of, hey, when these spots arise, here's how we want you to do things, or, here's how you should maybe think about doing things, that sort of a thing. But there's no doubt, like we're seeing an aggression, especially with the pinch hitting from Blake Butera. Like in that spot, right? He's not thinking about, we lose the DH. We lose something defensively. Tena greater than sign Young. And that is true. Jose Tena is a better hitter than Jacob Young. Yes, Young has hit some homers, but the overall offensive profile is not as good as Tena. And so all Butera in that moment is thinking is, Tena's a better hitter. We want to score a run. We want more offense. We go to Tena. And it's interesting to see him manage in that way.
Yeah, and that's all correct. But part of managing a baseball game is also in that moment thinking about what it does mean the rest of the game. It does matter what that means for your defense. You don't want to put yourself in a position where now you don't have your best team out there at the end of the night when the game is on the line. And again, I'm not saying that it was a indefensible move, anything like that. I just think it's really interesting that we've seen him do this a lot here through the first 2 months of the season. And sometimes it's worked out, but there have been some examples where going all in earlier has maybe left them with less than ideal options, I would say, both from a lineup standpoint, a defensive standpoint, and a pitching standpoint when you get to the end of the night.
I wonder, too, if Butera feels like emboldened by the fact that he has this offense playing at such a high level that he can do some things that he maybe otherwise wouldn't be doing. You know, like you can get a little bit of confidence as a manager. Like we talk about confidence with players, but with the offense doing so well, I wonder if any of this is rooted in Butera saying, hey, we're rolling. These guys are producing. I've got these guys in a position that nobody expected this team to be in. Like, I'm going to go ahead and, push forward and put, more pedal to the metal here when it comes to my decision making with something like pinch hitting.
Here's the set. Dubon runs, the pitch, hit in the air, center field deep. Jacob Young back, he's got room, shy of the warning track, he makes the catch. Mikolas is fired up, he survives Olsen here in the bottom of the 6th inning. Miles Mikolas out of the bullpen has tossed 5 scoreless innings, allowing only 3 hits.
Well, the Nats pitching in this game. So I mentioned the opener, Richard Lovelady, scoreless bottom of the 1st despite giving up a one-out double. And then the bulk man came into this game, Miles Mikolas. And he was really good. He tossed 5 scoreless innings on just 66 pitches, 42 strikes versus 24 balls. He gave up just 3 hits, all of which were singles. He had 3 strikeouts versus no walks. We have been noting the recent improvement from Miles Mikolas. And, you can kind of draw the line wherever you want in terms of where the improvement started. There are kind of a few spots that you can go to. But if you just look at what he has done in this month of May, so 4 games, 2 of which have been starts, ERA 3.26, 12 strikeouts versus 3 walks, and maybe as impressive as anything, a whip of 0.93. He has been significantly better lately, and it was not long ago that we were having the conversations of Miles Mikolas, when's he going to be out of the rotation? How long of a leash is there? Veteran pitcher, 1-year contract, road to nowhere, etc. The Nats have done a good job, and Mikolas has done a good job of him getting on track here. And he has become a guy who you no longer look at and say, all right, 3 innings at max, 3-4 runs to expect. Like, no, he's been pretty good here lately.
He's been more than pretty good. I think he's been excellent. And my stat, I took it a little further back. If you looked at him after his first 4 appearances, that's when the ERA was at 11.49 and the whip was at 2.170. That's just ghastly. You hardly would ever see anybody in the major leagues with a whip over 2 like that. So it's now 7 games since then, and it's a 3.48 ERA and a whip of exactly 1. So yes, a little bit better when you condense it down to just May, but that's 7, you split up his 11 games. Now a majority of those games, he's been much better than he was. Now, he was so awful early on that the overall numbers still don't look good so far. But he has been significantly better. He is throwing strikes. He's not walking guys, which is a huge part, I think, of the equation. He's not giving up home runs either. And I think this is where it starts to get interesting because they have obviously gone out of their way to try to manufacture these games so that he has the best chance of success. And that means using the opener in front of him. It means pulling him even if his pitch count is low. I mean, he went 5 scoreless in this game. He only threw 66 pitches, and he didn't pitch the first inning either. So if you're Blake Butera, I completely understand and probably agree with this idea of you got 5 scoreless out of this guy, get him out of there and move on to somebody else. Don't take any chances. And I think there was a bunch of left-handed hitters coming up anyways after that. But at some point, do you have to say, we need to scrap this idea of having to go out of our way to make life easy on Miles Mikolas, and we need to find out what happens if he just starts the game. And we have to find out what happens if we let him get extended more, especially when he's pitching well and the pitch count is low. I talked about all the domino effect of these things that they're doing, going all in. It would have been nice to have Richard Lovelady later in that game. He's the only real lefty reliever, not long man. You could maybe had him instead of Mitchell Parker later on, but you burned him up in the first inning. Maybe you would have liked to see if Mikolas could continue a little bit longer, and that saves you from using Parker or gets you deeper into the game. And by the time you get to the 11th inning, you have a few more fresh, top relievers instead of whoever's just available at that point. I'll be curious how this goes from here. They have done a masterful job of getting the most out of Mikolas and minimizing the amount of time that he's out there. but at what cost? Is that actually hurting them because of everything they're having to do to account for that?
Well, I think if he's going to be in your rotation, you have to handle him this way. I mean, he's not a young pitcher who you are developing. There's no real upside with him. Like, what you see from him now is the best that you're going to get from him. What I think you could do is you could have the opener go more than one inning. You know, like Lovelady, there's nothing saying you couldn't have had him go, say, 2 innings. So you start Mikolas in the third, and maybe that helps you out. The other thing is, I would imagine Mitchell Parker was brought into the game to pitch more than 1 inning, and that he ended up struggling in that inning, I think probably threw things off. And then the other thing is, you know, you're not anticipating extra innings. And with this pitching situation, that has become something that really stands out now. All of these extra inning games. I mentioned the stat earlier, 9 in 52 games. That's crazy that the Nats have played this many extra inning games. And I promise you, deep down inside, they don't like this. I don't think teams like these extra inning games at all. And they wreck pitching staffs. You know, they throw off your bullpen management. And so, you know, that isn't helping things either. The Nats in this game ended up using 5 pitchers beyond Richard Lovelady and Miles Mikolas. I mentioned Mitchell Parker, 2 runs in 1 inning. Bottom of the 7th, he allowed 2 runs, gave up a 1-out opposite field infield single by Michael Harris II to the left side of the infield. Issued a 1-out walk of Austin Riley, gave up an RBI single by ex-Nat Dominic Smith through the right side of the infield to tie the game at 1. By the way, Dom Smith having a very nice season, and gave up a 1-out RBI bunt single by Ha-Sung Kim for a 2-1 Braves lead. So a few things with this inning. First of all, Kim put down such a good bunt in that spot. But another thing was this, and when we talk about bad defense, it's not just about errors or even like advanced defensive stats. If you go back and watch the RBI single by Dom Smith, first baseman Luis Garcia Jr. as the cutoff man whiffed on the catch of the throw by right fielder Dylan Cruz. Austin Riley advanced to third base, and that set up that RBI bunt single by Ha-Sung Kim. And like, that's one of those moments, right? The little things, as we've heard so often over the years. But like, it's not an error. It's not something that, you know, you can quantify. It's not even something that necessarily gets even mentioned. But like, that allowed Riley to advance, and that set up that bunt play, a well-executed bunt play. There's a reason the Braves are so good, and they end up scoring a run in that spot. Clayton Beeter tossed a perfect bottom of the 8th. He did really well. 2 swinging strikeouts and facing the Braves' numbers 2 through 4 batters in Mauricio Dubon, Matt Olson, and Ozzie Albies. So Beeter looked good. Gus Varland looked good, a scoreless bottom of the 9th. But Orlando Ribalta, who had been looking good, did not look good. He allowed 2 runs, 1 earned in 1 inning. That was the bottom of the 10th. He, to the first batter he faced, gave up a leadoff RBI single by Chadwick Tromp up the middle on an 0-2 pitch to cut the Nats' lead to 4-3. Ribalta then issued a 5-pitch walk of Ronald Acuna Jr. Ribalta then gave up a first-pitch RBI single by Mauricio Dubon on a weak grounder that went through the right side of the infield to like the edge of the outfield grass to tie the game at 4. CJ Abrams had a hard time getting to the ball, and this was something on what was essentially an infield single. Chadwick Tromp scored all the way from second base. That was a wild play.
He scores from second on an infield single with the Nationals trying to guard against the bunt.
And then Ribalta issued a 1-out 4-pitch walk of Ozzie Albies. So Ribalta had been doing well, like we've said, but he in this outing, 23 pitches, just 12 strikes, 11 balls, and Paxton Schultz allowed the walk-off hit, allowed a run, which was unearned in 2/3 of an inning. Bottom of the 11th, gave up a walk-off 2-out RBI single by Chadwick Tromp to center field. So Parker, Beeter, Varland, Ribalta, Schultz. A lot to process with what went on with those 5 guys.
Yeah, a lot there. And as you pointed out, there were a number of those just plays not made, as I call them, in this game. They're not errors, as you said, but they're not well-struck balls, and they're plays that could have potentially turned into outs, and they did not do that. And you saw that on the little grounder between short and third. You saw that on the Dylan Cruz throw to the plate. You saw that, as you said, on the Garcia whiffing on the cutoff. There was a number of these, and if they're going to take a next step at some point here and start winning some of these close games against good teams, you have to make some of those plays. That's just mandatory that eventually you have to start making those plays. So I think that stands out. I think what also stands out is, you know, only a couple days ago, they were in really bad shape from bullpen standpoint. from the usage, but they had righted the ship the last couple of days with Andrew Alvarez pitching the one game, and then with Cade Cavalli going 7 on Thursday. They came into this game in really great shape, and now they're right back where they started again by using 6 of their 8 relievers. And that included Beater pitching back-to-back days, having just come off the IL. He looked great, and that's fantastic, but that's a bit of a bold move using him back-to-back like that. Ribalta pitched back-to-back days. He had the bases loaded on Thursday, had to come right back the next day. It's the first time in the big leagues, at least this year, that he's gone back-to-back days, and he's thrown over 20 pitches in each of those innings. You get to Paxton Schultz in the 11th. It's hard to fault him for anything. He retired the first 2 batters, and they gave up a soft single to center, and that's your ball game. But who else did they have after that? It was Brad Lord, who had a couple days off after throwing like 40-something pitches, and it was Andrew Alvarez, who's only had 1 day off since his long outing. Obviously, he wasn't available. And this is that domino effect I've been talking about. We've said it many times over the years doing this podcast. When you use that many relievers in a close game, the odds of all of them being really effective diminish with each extra arm that you bring in. And this was a night where some of these guys were great, but to ask essentially 6 relievers to all be lights out against a really good Braves team was too much to ask. And so it did in the end come back to bite them with all the guys they had to use before the game was over.
Yeah, Bill Madden, a longtime baseball writer in New York, had a great saying once. I'll never forget when I heard him say this. It's the constant search for someone who doesn't have it. He's being critical of managers who use, a multitude of relievers in games. The idea of why use 4 different guys where if the first guy has it, you can just stay with him and maybe he has it for multiple innings instead of mixing and matching and overthinking things. And, it's a very old school take on things. But I mean, I think there is some truth to that. Like, what are the odds that if you use 5 relievers, all of them are going to have it on that given night?
And they have done that at times because when you have Alvarez going the final 4 innings of a game, you're riding the hot hand and let's let it play out and not use somebody else. And that has worked at times as well. So there is some logic behind that part of it as well. It's tough. Bullpen management is by far and away the toughest thing for any big league manager as far as the actual X's and O's of managing a game. And for a rookie manager, it's something that you have to learn along the way. And Blake Butera is learning it. And I'm not saying he's done a bad job of it, but all these situations that keep coming up, hopefully he's taking something from it and helping to shape his decisions as he moves forward in this job.
And I do come back to this. These extra inning games are not helping. The Nats need a run of like non-extra inning games. And lately, it's not just like games going to the 10th. This game went to the 11th. We had the 16-7, 12 inning loss to the New York Mets on Monday. It's like these are extra inning games that we're seeing with the Nats, and the taxing of the pitching staff does continue. So Nats back to 2 games below 500. Game 2 of this 3-game series at the Braves Saturday afternoon at 4:10. Jake Irvin will be the Nats starting pitcher. You tell us what you think. Hit us up on X at Nats_chat. You can find us on Blue Sky at Nats Chat Podcast. You can email us natschatpodcast@gmail.com. All Nationals radio highlights on Nats Chat are courtesy of 106.7 The Fan. For Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. We thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat Podcast.
I looked into it more deeply, and I found that apparently what happened is that he was laid off 5 years ago, and no one ever told him about it. But through some kind of glitch in the payroll department, he still gets a paycheck.
So we just went ahead and fixed the glitch.
Great.
So Milton has been let go.
Well, just a second there, Professor.
We fixed the glitch. So he won't be receiving a paycheck anymore, so it'll just work itself out naturally.
We always like to avoid confrontation whenever possible. Problem is solved from your end.